Phone on. Right. Good evening, everybody. It's 6:30. I believe we're already live on the webcam. So we'll make a start to the meeting. Firstly, shall I do the announcements? The fire evacuation procedure for the evening meetings. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in the War Memorial Park with your coat and umbrella and everything else. Webcast of meetings. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Microphones. Please can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcam, that you must speak directly into your microphone. The microphone stem can be moved so that it is as close to your mouth as possible if needed. Okay? Mobile phones, please switch off your phones or turn them to silent. Thank you. Right, firstly, just to say welcome. Councillor Lee has given his apologies, so I'm as Vice Chair taking over this evening. And I had an operation on my eye yesterday, so it looks a bit red and horrible. So please don't worry that I have got some terrible disease or whatever. But as usual, I might need a little bit of help with actually seeing where everybody is. So just bear with me. And we've got this evening, we've got Phil, who's covering for Ellie, who unfortunately is not well today. So we'll carry on with the meeting and hopefully everything is fine. Okay. So item 1, apologies for absence. That is obviously Councillor Alex Lee. I don't believe there is substitution, and everybody else is here apart from Councillor Howard Sorrell, I think. Everybody else is here. Okay. Declarations of interest. I just need to tell you that a few mentions in the paper on climate change. There is mention of Cleaver Community Energy. Just to tell you, I'm an unpaid director, so that you know that I'm an unpaid director of Cleaver Community. There are no financial implications on the paper, it's just an information. So just to make sure that you are aware that I do have an interest only in that matter. Has anyone else got any other declarations of interest they'd like to share? No? Okay, thank you. Urgent matters. I'm not aware that there are any urgent matters to raise. So we will move on. The minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of September 2023. Obviously the committee will have seen the minutes, and I will move that we accept them to be signed as a correct record, unless anyone has any comments on the accuracy. Would you like to agree that I move to sign the minutes? Everybody happy? Okay, I will sign them after the meeting. Okay, so the next item is item 5. This is the progress on the implementation of the adopted climate change and air quality strategy, and the papers are in front of you, and I'm going to ask our portfolio holder, Councillor Tomlin, to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So tonight we're going to give you a progress report on the 2019 declared climate emergency. It's getting closer to our deadline dates that we have agreed to reduce our carbon footprint, and really we're here tonight to seek not your noting of the report, but your comments, your constructive insight to what you might wish us to cover, what we're not covering, sort of to critique it. So this is not just a simple rubber stamp exercise. Let's really get some sort of contributions going if you feel in the mood. So I'm not going to go any further with anything in detail, because you're about to get a slide presentation from Sam Taylor and Mark Lambert. Mark will start off and Sam obviously will follow, and then we'll take questions, and hopefully we'll all understand where we are. So thank you. Mark.
Great, thank you, Councillor Tomlin. Sam and I will just talk you through some of the key points from the report. We haven't unfortunately got any slides this evening, but we'll draw to your attention the key points to be aware of. That's okay, not at all. The paper. That's right. The paper before you this evening is the report itself and the updated action plan that was adopted back in 2019, which we've taken the opportunity to update as we progressed over time with new actions and things that we've struck off. Just to bring to your attention a few things from the paper itself, I'm going to start off just by introducing the background to where we are in terms of the roadmap, the progress we're making, and then Sam will talk through a bit more about some of the particular projects that we've been doing of late and where we're focusing our efforts. So just drawing your attention to page 16 of the agenda, this is there's a table there and a graph that outlines where we are in terms of our operational emissions. And if you remember, we've declared that we would be net zero carbon by December 2025. So the graph at the bottom there just shows the progress we've made since declaring the emergency. As you see, there's an obvious dip when we had lockdown and things weren't perhaps happening as they were. Since then, there's been the expected bounce back as we've returned to the office and things have been functioning more normally in that sense. More recently, we've been making good progress in reducing our emissions. We moved into one building. We've continued to roll out EV electric vehicles for our fleet. So we think we believe we're moving in the right direction. There has been a slight blip in terms of some of the information linked to the waste contract, where the service quality has been improved over recent years, such that we've been able to support residents more readily. So that's where we are in terms of emissions with our operations. But moving on to the borough-wide emissions, there's a lag in terms of the data being made available from the government. So the latest data set that we have is from 2021. So there's a 2-year lag there that is commonplace across the country. Again, in terms of the lockdown period, that has had an obvious impact on the emissions that arose in the borough. So probably best to draw your attention to table 2 on page, I think it's page 17 or 18 of the paper, and the column which starts subset CO2, which excludes those emissions that are associated with vehicles passing through the borough, so the cars and lorries on the M3 and the trains that pass through the borough, since we've got no influence on the behaviour of those activities. You'll see that we've dipped in 2020 linked to COVID, but again there's been the expected bounce back. I think we continue to make progress in terms of reducing those against the 2018 targets. Looking back against 2018, we're down by 10% in terms of emissions in the borough. So again, that's good progress and something that we'll continue to support. And some of the actions Sam will talk through with you will highlight how we're taking action to support residents in reducing their emissions generally. Probably best to move on to Sam, who will talk you through a few further elements in a bit more detail.
Evening all. Yeah, so we've, as you'll see in the report, kind of set it out as in previous years around actions to date that we've progressed, and then also looking ahead at what we're working on currently and looking ahead. So a few kind of key actions to draw out we felt worth mentioning. The first one, supporting our residents and looking to support businesses as well, is the launch of the Green Team at the back end of summer. Hopefully you've all got lots of information about that, but we're really keen for you guys to share more and more with your residents that these guys are around. They've also been supplemented by some grant funding that we've been successful in being awarded from government, focused particularly on energy efficiency and supporting residents with energy efficiency improvements to their homes, offering kind of additional services to what they're doing. But the Green Team are also supporting, looking to support people with how to improve biodiversity in their garden, for example, and how to help people get around in more sustainable ways. We've also had a number of grant schemes we've been able to offer, mostly from government funding, and overall there's been over £1 million of funding given to residents in Basingstoke. It's still very expensive, so the number of properties supported is unfortunately needs a lot more. It needs a huge increase in uptake, but actually we've been able to support an awful lot of money and financial support going to some of these residents that need it the most. I guess we were looking to support this wider change for businesses as well, and one action that we undertook was a survey of potential for solar panels, looking at non-domestic buildings in the borough. and that was completed earlier this year. We've been reaching out to businesses when we did that initially as a way to provide an indicative value, trying to overcome that first hurdle, I guess, for how much it might cost and what the benefit might be. And increasingly, when we've been engaging businesses at events, that's been a useful hook. And then, as Mark's alluded to, we've had an ongoing kind of rollout of electric vehicles in our fleet. The new Green Team is a good example of a nice jazzy electric vehicle that hopefully you might see poodling around. We're also looking at alternative fuels and increasingly trialling HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil, in a number of our operational vehicles as well. Looking ahead, there's a number of areas that we're working on currently and focusing on that I touched on the paper. A big one, considering our 2025 operational target, is our buildings and our property portfolio. How do we continue to reduce carbon there? Our leisure centres are a huge chunk of that. They're outsourced, and there are a number of studies looking at how we can decarbonise those buildings. We are working to, as part of the council plan, you might have seen, to install solar panels on our council-owned community centres, and there's some work going on now to prioritise those, to understand the kind of potential, and that the previous study I alluded to has been really useful there, with a view to roll that out over the coming years. The local plan is a huge lever we have as a council, obviously, to shape development in the borough, and ensuring that the policies around new building standards there are really ambitious and robust is vital. Obviously, the Regulation 18 public consultation on the local plan is due in the new year, and the policies, the draft policies set out are really cutting edge. We continue to work with a number of partners across the borough for delivering some of our aims, in particular things like the housing associations and social landlords, particularly Vivid and Sovereign, who we are now meeting increasingly regularly to discuss what they're already doing, and they're particularly they've got quite a lot of programs in place to decarbonise their property, how we can support that, how we could work with residents in areas that they're working with, and tie in the work of the Green Team in particular. That's a really evolving piece of work for us there. And other local groups, so Citizens Advice, BVA, Basingstoke Voluntary Action, particularly the Green Team is enabling us to make some of these connections and have an extra tangible way of supporting what they're already doing. And finally, the council is working on developing an anti-poverty strategy, and quite a lot of links there to fuel poverty, which we know is a real issue still for residents at the moment, a lot of which we're seeking to tackle as well, with improving energy efficiency and cutting carbon. There's a lot of co-benefits of some of those actions, so work as a team going on there. They were just some things that we thought worth highlighting, but I guess it's over now to you, Chair, for comments and queries.
Thank you, Sam. I think the first thing is that perhaps we can ask questions of the officers on either the paper or obviously the action plan that's been updated. I'm not pleased with the word update. It's got some new words in it, whatever we use, that on progress. And then obviously we can have a debate to see whether we support or got any alternatives. So would anybody like to ask the first question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a long way away.
Just about to see
Thank you. Lovely paper. Thank you very much. Two questions, if you'll forgive me for asking two in once rather than coming back. It is difficult with COVID and the way that our carbon footprint and everything dropped, and it looks nice for a little while, doesn't it? And then it's sort of going back a bit. So one of my questions is your levels of confidence as the people that are doing all of this, that we can get that graph to start going down again rather than going up, because we've had 2 years of going up, not just one, because 2021 was 2,912, and then it's gone up to 3,286 in 21-22, and up again in 22-23. So it kind of makes you feel a bit wobbly when you look at that. So if you are able to give us any assurance, I realise it's a very difficult question. I would be very interested in hearing your thoughts on that. And then the other one is about the hydrogenated fuel. Sounds fantastic that it reduces carbon, but what I don't understand is what are the other implications of using that? Are there other positives, but also is it, do we have to make adaptations to vehicles? Do we know if there are other costs? So, is there more to the story than we just don't put this fuel in and we put another fuel in? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vaux. Shall I start off with the first question around the figures going up and down and our level of confidence? We're doing an awful lot, we're taking an awful lot of action, and the action plan outlines where we're focusing our efforts. And I think with that in mind, I think there's confidence that the graph will start to go down again, as it has done as a trend, generally speaking. So lots of things in hand, lots of things that are coming forward in the future. The continued rollout of electric vehicles in the fleet, the move to kind of look at our buildings and decarbonise those as best we can, particularly at the operational stock that we look after, and many other things. We're looking to roll out HVO in our waste fleet as well, which is going to have a significant impact in time, as well as looking at the way we manage our open space and the natural environment such that it can sequester and absorb more carbon over time. So in that respect, I think there's a great deal of confidence that things will go in the right direction over time. The other point about HVO, perhaps if I start off and Sam chips in if I perhaps get things wrong, there don't have to be any adaptations to the vehicles because we've been testing them with the existing fleet and trialling them before we roll them out more widely. So I think that there's not a huge amount that needs to be changed in that respect. We do have to consider the way that the store is stored on site. So there's a need for kind of tanks and storage to make sure that that's enabled and we can easily top up our vehicles as we need to. So that's work in hand as well. We've also been exploring kind of manufacturers' warranties around HVO use in the vehicles as well to make sure there's no undue implications.
Yeah, thank you very much. So is it then that we're not quite sure whether engines will wear in the same way and that there'll be any difference in the maintenance and other vehicles being the way that they work? Do you think that there will be other implications in the longer term in the engine side?
There doesn't appear to be on the trials we've run so far, and I think the research has been undertaken more widely across the country indicates there's no arising issues, but we want to be sure of these points before we start to impact the vehicles in their day-to-day use.
I'll just add quickly as well that some of the other benefits include things like air quality, so actually they burn cleaner, which is nice. So as well as the carbon reduction, they're talking about kind of some of the air pollution as well. So that's one of the attractions. I mean, it's not perfect. I think so we've been really diligent to make sure that we're getting waste fuel stocks as opposed to kind of there's a macro issue. I guess if everyone switched to a fuel like this overnight, then actually where does that all come from? And is there enough waste fuel to go around? But it's a great drop-in solution in the interim whilst technology develops for certainly some of our weirder and more wonderful vehicles that aren't ready low carbon alternatives for. And I guess one point on your first question that perhaps gets lost in the noise a little bit, I guess, of the overall numbers is that emissions have come down in pretty much every area except actually the waste contracts last year. So that's kind of bumped up our figures, not artificially, that's the wrong word, but it's hidden some of the other reductions we've got that we have pulled together a kind of separate update that goes into a bit more detail on the granular level that perhaps we should include next year, which kind of shows actually where things have reduced in other areas like our office energy consumption, for example. So
just to add to that, yes, we did have to invest in tanks for the fuel at our Hart and the Wade Road depots. We were able to fund that from funds that we obtained from drop-off in service, if you like. So it kind of self-washed its face, really, on that. So it hasn't really cost us anything for that investment. But we are not alone in the country, as the officer said. The use of this fuel is quite widespread, and anecdotally, the vehicles apparently run smoother, but we'll see. They might go bang quicker, but they run smoother. No, they're fine. We've been using it on our mowers and other fleets. And the problem in terms of potentially using electricity or electric vehicles is that they're incredibly expensive and not very available. So at the moment, it's one of those. It's a good option, maybe not the ultimate in the future, but it's quite a promising thing. And those are the government figures that suggest very high levels of carbon reduction. So it's an opportunity we have taken. So, thank you.
Could I just clarify then, what about the costs of the fuel?
I believe it costs a little bit more, but we're entering in. One of the things is security of supply. So we've entered into contracts with a major supplier of this fuel, so that we don't run out, because that could be incredibly embarrassing. Or we have to go to the supermarket and get chip fat, which would be doubly embarrassing. But so we're entered into a partnership of fuels that do that. But I think there is an extra cost. I'm not sure that it doesn't give any greater miles per gallon, but there is a small on cost on that. Yes, it is more expensive. Yeah.
Mr. Golding?
Thank you. Can I just clarify on table 1, above that you talk about 2 major things that have increased the figures for this year, one of which is we haven't been putting as much carbon into our parks as we thought we had. And from the table, it looks like you've rolled that back across all of the years. So I just wanted to check my understanding was correct on that one. But I then wanted to check what had been done about the homeworking figures. Are they just in this year's, or have you rolled those back across all the years as well?
So for question 1, yes, we have. Yeah, so we've kind of, I guess there's been no material change to our green space enough to say it was different. Part of the same study that updated it is looking at what we could do to improve that moving forward. So whereas the homeworking is just in 2022-23, this is the first year that the government have had an official emissions factor that we can use. So although we've done some kind of estimates and calculations on that before, we haven't felt those. We started doing that for the first time last year internally and informally, but haven't officially included it until this year. Obviously, I guess as well, kind of this year was probably the first year we've had a status quo in terms of working from home, moving forward, the 60-40 split as a kind of average, whereas obviously we had 2 years of it kind of all being a bit up in the air, and previous to that, kind of the default obviously was not. So that's kind of why we settled that for now. But
Lovely. That's helpful to know that part of the dip is because actually we haven't calculated a part of the activity just because we didn't have the figures. That's fine. So could you tell me a bit more about what you're hoping to do in parks to make it better?
So the study that's been recently undertaken for us by the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust has looked at the way that we manage our existing open spaces and biodiversity, such that it can be managed without impacting upon users of those areas, the dog walkers, the people playing football, and yet we can still absorb more carbon within those particular kind of fringed areas, as it were. So they've given us some more detailed advice about the best way of achieving that, and we now need to work through and see how that can actually be rolled out across those particular areas, taking into account the different characteristics of those open spaces, such that, as I say, we don't impact upon the usability of those. It's quite a technical study so far in that respect, and there's quite a lot of science behind how you absorb carbon. So really this has been the opportunity to make sure that what we did previously was as robust as it could be, and based upon the most recent research. I think when WSP did the work a few years back, it was more desk-based, and there's been more established best practice in that respect.
Councillor Compton-Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really helpful, and it's great to see all the progress that's been made. 2 quick questions. The first one is, I'm guessing that part of the Hampshire County Council study is looking at school buildings and how we can make them more energy efficient. And the second question is, there's some interesting wording, 7.19 on page 25 about Vivid and Sovereign, saying that there's an awareness that both organisations have a long-term programme to improve energy efficiency. I'm just wondering, how are we working with them? Because that's a heck of a big piece of work. And how closely are we working with them, and what are they achieving, and how are we monitoring it, please?
Well, excuse me, we've started to have regular conversations with both of the main RSLs in that respect, so we've got a good dialogue going on from the outset. We've begun to engage, in particular with regard to the current consultation that Sovereign recently launched around Buckskin and South Ham. So we'll begin to embed and understand more about the opportunities as that progresses. Obviously, it's a very long-term project, and the consultation's only just commenced, but it's the start of a conversation, we think, in that respect. More broadly, both associations have got very large estates across many areas, so we're beginning to understand again a bit more about how they intend to focus their efforts across the areas that they look after. And I think there's going to be a great deal of focus on retrofit within those homes, so something that we're keen to work with and enable, not just for the residents' benefit, but also for the kind of local economy and upskilling residents to meet the needs of the homes that need that support and improvement.
I may just add to that, of course, our local plan, which will be January for Reg 18, that definitely has come on in leaps and bounds, if you like, in terms of what it is requesting of house builders and thus any new build, our regeneration programmes, standards that we expect houses to be built to. So, this is not going to be added to our 2025, but yet again, it will be actions of this council increasing carbon reduction by either direction or regulation. And there are other things where we have used our money and it's enabled carbon reductions, but we're not claiming them because it's not an operation, or is it? Because it's the use of our money. So that could, I mean, that's if we don't want to scratch the pan to bolster the figures, but there's an awful lot. There are things like, what we say, the aquadrome. Yeah, that is a lot, hundreds of tons of carbon. But we're looking at, obviously, regenerating it. So our actions will be to, as we relate here, go for a much lower carbon footprint on that, and it's on the way we can use technology. But we can't cram that. It won't be delivered by the 2025, but we are going ahead in the future with these type of initiatives, because we must. So we're obviously not going to grab that and pull it back into the numbers. So we've got to do it other ways, but we're still going to make it better. It's not, we don't stop at 2025. We're not going to go on to do something else. Okay, thanks. Well, yes. Sorry, Mark, you better take that one with your.
Well, excuse me. Obviously, Hampshire have declared a climate emergency as well. Their timescale is slightly different to ours, but I know they're working hard to improve their estate because obviously there's energy costs associated with running those buildings, and they are beginning to improve them across the board. I can't perhaps comment too much in detail on the specifics around the borough, but we are engaged with them, and we're also beginning to think about how we can best engage with the children attending the schools to ensure that they're kind of nagging their parents and the like to make change at home.
Any further questions? No. Okay. Shall we now move to any comments on the progress and anything that you'd like to add to it or comment on?
Thank you, Chair. I'll chip in again. I'm sure other people have got other things to say. I'm mindful that Councillor Tomlin asked if we had any other suggestions or comments. And the thing is, it's a huge area of work, this, and it covers an enormous, broad area of activity. So this may already be happening anyway, but reading the paper, the area which didn't come across to me as necessarily being there, doesn't mean to say it's not happening, is the challenge of how we engage with families and residents who find it more challenging to get involved in this kind of work, because you've always got quite a lot of people who, by their I was going to say nature, which is probably not the right word when you're talking about green things, but they're interested, they want to make things happen, they want to engage on how to reduce their own personal carbon footprint, they want to know how to live lives which are greener. But there are quite a few families for whom this is a step too far. They don't have the bandwidth to get involved. So it's more about how we get to engage with them rather than them engaging with us. And yes, some of that might come through the housing associations, because that is one of our demographies, but it isn't the only one. It isn't just about retrofitting, it is about lifestyle, and it is about choices in the way we do all sorts of things, how we take our holidays, how we take our recreation, how we travel to work. I mean, it covers all aspects of our lives. And I just wondered if there was more we could do to try and reach some of our demographies where they might well be interested, but they don't know how to get involved, and they don't appreciate what they might be able to do. Thank you.
It's actually a very good point, and we will put that down. Our green team, our offer is part, but it is a challenge about how we could do that. So we welcome any suggestions of the education that we need to do, or demonstration to people. It's galling sometimes that some of our community energy groups, the engagement with them is incredibly well. There are quite a lot of folk out there, sadly, who are not bothered, and we've got to try and capture that it's critical. So yeah, I mean, absolutely noted. Thanks.
Yeah, I am in support of what Councillor Volks has said, because there are barriers to entry of this, and what Chris has said is demonstrated, and we've demonstrated here because the home upgrade grants for air source pumps is at 11, which doesn't seem too high across the borough, and local authority delivery of only 3 air source pumps. So whilst we can control what's in our own estate quite clearly, it's what the bigger targets of what our residents can do on our behalf in terms of climate change. But it seems to be that if that's the case, is it fair for the residents to bear the cost of this?
I was only going to say, kind of echoing that point about the challenge and recognising that in delivering this work. I guess one plea would be, if you know of organisations that are reaching some of these groups, please connect us with them. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges I guess we have is to what extent are we best placed to deliver messaging ourselves versus supporting organisations that are engaging with these people already and giving them some guidance or tips and saying, by the way, when you're engaging with these people, could you weave in some of this messaging? Kind of perversely and unfortunately, the cost of energy at the moment is the silver lining is a good hook to engage people that might not otherwise think about this, because people want to reduce their energy bills, and it might be that carbon saving is a happy coincidence for them, but there are other scenarios like that, health, quality, just comfort, all these other kind of things around the home, getting around that we can use, but it's about how we potentially do that ourselves with the green team versus supporting other organisations that do that. So yeah, I guess the plea is, if you've got organisations doing stuff, do send them our way, and we'd happily engage.
Thanks. I mean, I haven't given it a great deal of thought, and I'm sure around this table there are lots of people who've got better ideas than me, but the things that just come immediately to mind are areas like the CAB. When people are approaching them, I'm not sure when I last used some of the programmes that the CAB offer to help us about cost of living and all that kind of thing, that I'm aware that there are lots of grants for people who have poor insulation in homes which are not picked up, they're not taken up. And I think one of the big reasons for that is that people worry that they're going to get a charge, that they're going to be, there's a fraud in it somehow, that somebody's going to come in their house and they'll rob them. And, you know, there are some genuine views why people don't take up those kinds of help to change their heating, change their. So it's about how we engage with groups, I think, a lot in our community centres. So the over 55s groups, some of the church groups, so that we find ways, whether it's the Green Team or others, I don't know, where we go and present to them and we assure them that these are good things to do and that they're okay. You know, give people confidence, because if they're coming from a council team, I would like to think people would have more confidence in them. And I think at the other end, schools are absolutely spot on for this, because children are so enthusiastic and they take that back home. So I think often you can get engagement from parents in a lot of these things by going through the children and getting them enthusiastic about it. And then suddenly, you know, the families pick it up as well, hopefully, and it picks up. Those are just a couple of things that come to mind, but I would, you know, I'm sure there are better ones than mine.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I help a little bit on certainly Citizens Advice in Tadley have been given energy advice all last winter, and we're finding people who might like to have the people come and look at their properties and give them advice on energy use and things that they could do. And I had the opportunity to speak to some members of the Green Team the other day, who I know are going out and doing that very successfully. And I think one of the barriers to add to that is that you've got quite a lot of elderly people who live in 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses on their own now, because people have moved on for various reasons, and they've got a loft full of everything that the family has left behind, and they just literally cannot get into their loft because of to do more insulation, because there is so much there and they can't physically do it now. And it's a thing that people forget when you think, oh, you should be doing your loft insulation. But if you can't get into the loft and they tell you you've got to remove everything, it's a problem. So we probably need to look at things a little bit, you know, truthfully, if you like, to see where we can deliver. But I know that they're being done, and I know there's organisations, and I know that the staff have got some monitors to go and do that. But obviously referrals from organisations that are helping people who are more vulnerable, including through schools. We certainly got quite a lot of movement with the schools in Tadley area when the vouchers were available, because the Citizen Advice went directly to the schools to tell the parents, it went for the newsletter, and parents applied for the vouchers that they were able to get. So again, it's just making those connections to make sure the people that perhaps don't normally come and look at the Borough Council website, for example, do get those sort of messages. I know that you put out the newsletter and that goes through every door, and hopefully that will pick up some extra people. But if anybody else has got any good thoughts about how they can engage more and how the message can get out, please share. Commissioner Burnett?
Thank you. One of the ideas might be warm hubs that were set up. And I remember, is it Octopus Energy last year, they sent out electric blankets or warm blankets for older people. So it's little tips like that they might find really helpful. Just a couple of other things. One of them was, how do we engage with farmers? I know you've written landowners down here, but I was a bit shocked when I heard recently there's a huge farm near us, and apparently all of the crops, apart from the borage, went to the anaerobic digester. Now, I might be wrong on that, but that's what I heard. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it would be great to know that we were working with these landowners, because there is such an awful lot of countryside around us. And just by way of example, you know, there was a whole load of trees that went down recently, and there's nothing we can do about it. We don't own the land. But do we have ways of just monitoring with them? Hang on, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Just keeping them accountable in some way. And the other question was, I think it's something that you're doing about, the community. I think you mentioned the community furniture project, which I think is an amazing initiative. It's fantastic. I just wondered, do all the estate agents know about the community furniture project so that when somebody moves, they can say, if you've got some spare furniture or white goods, please tell these people? And secondly, do the funeral directors know about it?
There's a huge number of useful points there, and I think we'll take them away because I think some of them we are actioning, but there's certainly some points there around the community furniture project which we can investigate in a bit more detail. Just had a quick look on the Hampshire County Council website, and warm spaces are advertised. So again, that's something that we can start to promote through the Green Team to make sure they can spread that good message. Farmers, we've got contacts in our natural environment team, and I think we're beginning to develop those relationships with landowners in a bit more detail so that we can understand what their aspirations are. Obviously, there's things happening around biodiversity net gain and other kind of similar projects, and we'd like to kind of mesh carbon sequestration with those down the line. So, again, that's the point we'll take away and discuss with colleagues.
Any other additions people would like to offer? No? Okay. Are you all happy then that we've had a look and we're happy with the progress, and one or two comments about things that we might want to add to? And obviously if you think there are other teams, I'm sure the teams will be very grateful to receive any comments that you have, to make sure that when we get the final update, which is in some months' time, I presume, that we will obviously have everything reflected there that we will want to have. Okay, so thank you, the officers, for attending and for the very interesting brief. And it took a lot of reading, and we seem to be doing an awful lot of things. I suppose, as mentioned earlier, the fact is that it's a huge thing that we do. It across everything that we do now, which is right and important. But obviously to try and keep track of everything, which obviously we have to prioritise some things, and other things have been added, some new things come along. So it's interesting to see that it's a working document, should we say. So it's a progress, work in progress. Okay, thank you. So do you want to make any recommendations to Chris before he leaves us, that just carry on the good work? Are you happy with that?
I'm here for the next one.
Yeah.
One thing I forgot to say it when I made my comments. That website is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's so easy to use, and there's so much really good information. So if you could pass it on to the team.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So if you're happy that we don't want to add anything further than those comments have been made, we'll move on then to the next item, which is the biodiversity strategy presentation. And we've got Rob here and obviously Tom Payne, who are going to deliver the presentation on the screen. Now, I think you might have been sent a copy yesterday. There might be a slide missing on it, so obviously if there is an update, they'll send you out the latest version. But I'll let Rob go through what he's got, and you can ask any questions at the end as before. Chris, do you want to present?
Well, just by way of the other emergency that we have. I mean, the two are incredibly interlinked, actually, but is our biodiversity, our ecological emergency, I think we call it. And there are actions that there are statutory actions we have to do, but there's actually this whole linking of our environment, our lack of nature. I mean, when I took the portfolio on, I was made to think, when was the last time you washed insects off the front of your car in the summer? You know, we are losing species left, right and centre, I think, and I'm afraid our rivers in the UK, we're some of the worst in the world. We're just not really looking after our side of the planet, but I think we need to. And some of the exciting things that Rob will present to you in the strategy he's working on, I think are going to see that we've got the right intentions for Basingstoke. We want to do many things, and the whole carbon balance, the whole wildlife balance is in our hands, and this is really where we are, and we're not going to use the word progress update, if you like, or whatever you want to call it. It's where we are statement, and it's coming live soon. So this is an opportunity for input before it becomes the document that comes to you for you to note, if you follow. So this is your chance to try and help things we might have missed, things we should be doing, and to give us the feedback. So anyway, I'll hand over to the officers. Thank you.
I would re-emphasise that obviously when we order the scrutiny training, it's now an ideal place to actually see where we've got to so far, for you to input before we get the strategy when it might be too late to add everything. So again, the direction of travel. So over to.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, hi. So as Councillor Tomlin has already mentioned, we declared an ecological emergency in 2021, and producing a biodiversity strategy to support nature's recovery was one of the key actions. So the aim of the strategy is we're going to create a high-level document focused on vision and priority setting, the why and what, rather than the how. It's going to outline what we can do to protect and enhance biodiversity in the borough and our estate. It's going to identify our priorities where we can have the most impact. So it's going to outline the aims and objectives of the council to support biodiversity where it has influence. So we've broken this down into 3 sections. Our priorities will be broken down into 3 sections. So it's what we must do, i.e. what are our statutory duties, and also how can we maximise the influence where we have those statutory duties, where we have direct control, such as our estate and with our corporate policies and strategies, and where we can lead, enable and inspire. Hopefully you recognise that phrasing from the climate strategy as well, which we're trying to mirror in order to help maximise the co-benefits alongside as well. So our work to date. We have created a biodiversity strategy working group. Both Councillor Tomlin and Tuck sit on that. Councillor Tuck as the champion for nature and rivers. Councillor Tomlin is obviously the portfolio holder. We have several officers on there from across the organisation who have expertise and influence in this specific area. And we've had 4 meetings so far. We've delayed our 5th one. It's not been long since we set this up. This has all been rather fast, to be perfectly honest. We want to get things down on paper. We want to start taking action. So it is an emergency after all. Our 5th meeting is very, very soon. We're waiting for this meeting so we could take the feedback from this meeting to our working group. We ran a really successful stakeholder workshop with some fabulous attendance actually. We had representation from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, the National Trust, the North Wessex Downs AONB, the 2 catchment partnerships that we have in the borough that we're part of, though we do actually have 4 catchments. We're only active members on 2. Natural England, the Environment Agency, Forestry England, Natural Basingstoke and Greener Basingstoke as well, both came along. They brought representation. They are excited and energised by their engagement in this process. It's really good, really progressing our relationship with them. We also sent out a questionnaire which went out to all of our local conservation groups, so that's those that Natural Basingstoke represent, as well as special interest groups like the local badger group and the local bat group. We actually we're really pleased with 48 responses for that. And we've been doing members engagement tonight. We've presented to you all some time ago as well. So all of this engagement is there to help us draft priorities. So through the workshop, questionnaire and engagement we've been doing internally, talking with various teams as well, we've been drafting priorities. It's worth mentioning the priorities that you'll see, and you've already seen through this being handed out before the meeting, are in no particular order. They're They're not in a hierarchy. They're not prioritised, the priorities themselves. And in fact, the wording of those priorities is very likely to change as well, to try and refine them, to try and build, I guess, a concise set of robust priorities that will be published and you will see come January. We want to get your thoughts on what's missing, as the councillors have said, before we finalise our wording. Just because something is mentioned here tonight doesn't mean that it's going to be included in our final set of priorities. This is very much a long list. We do need to prioritise. We can't try and focus on everything. We need to try and focus on the things where we can make the most difference. So we want to enshrine some principles in the strategy to outline how we're going to approach our work with biodiversity. We believe these will help achieve the greatest impact. So this thinking emerged at the workshop, actually, which is really encouraging given how successful the workshop was. It highlighted a whole way of thinking that we're seeking to capture. And it's about how we're jointly working together. So I'll read this out, if you forgive me, for the length of this. But we want to play to our strengths and focus our effort where we can make the most difference. We want to work in partnership. We want to take account of the ecosystem services provided by nature, some of which we've already mentioned earlier in the presentation earlier, to do with carbon. Maximise co-benefits with climate change, ensuring alignment with other internal policies and strategies, especially with the climate strategy and the climate team, being innovative and bold in our actions, being an exemplar landowner and be visible where we take action as well. We want to empower staff and volunteers, ensure past learnings inform our future, set clear measures of success. We want to limit exclusion and promote equality, diversity and inclusion, and communicate with intention to the right audiences. So those are our set of draft principles. Moving on to our priorities. As I've said, these have been categorised into things we must do, where we have direct influence, and where we can lead, enable and inspire. So what must we do? We must deliver our strategy duties. These include our new enhanced biodiversity duty, delivering biodiversity net gain, both of which are captured within the Environment Act. We will also continue to deliver on hedgerow regulations, development control, planning policy, designating local nature reserves, and support in the designation of sites of importance for nature conservation. We want to, we must, rather than we want to, but we want to as well engage with the local nature recovery strategy process, which is happening as we speak, to ensure it captures the borough's priorities as well, and ensure all our statutory duties are effective and impactful, especially where DC and planning policy, whilst maximising the opportunities that exist, especially around BNG, and ensuring we limit the impact of development on biodiversity. And we want to express our success through effective monitoring as well. And through monitoring, through developing a monitoring plan, we want to also utilise that to engage with volunteers through citizen science as well. So where we have direct control, we want to ensure biodiversity is a consideration across our organisation, in our policies and wherever we have influence, which is quite a big statement in itself. Ensure nature-based solutions are utilised wherever possible. Ensure our land is resilient and adaptable to climate change, promoting flood risk reduction, carbon sequestration, alongside enhancements for biodiversity, which I think was something that was referred to by Councillor over on the far side of the table. Ensure our nature-rich sites are accessible to all, to ensure the health and well-being benefits are available to all. And that's not just physical infrastructure, that's how we communicate about the access and these sites. Ensure we use clear, up-to-date baseline data and understanding. ensure our data management and GIS is robust, up to date and accessible to others, ensure our enforcement is thorough and effective, seek to improve and reduce the impacts of non-native species, developing opportunities for arisings from our sites and others. So that is our cuttings, conservation arisings, and actually relates to what Councillor Compton-Burnett was referring to around bioenergy as well. Alongside the strengthening community strategy, recognise the importance of volunteers in their communities and enhance our estate for biodiversity and climate. So we've not got a slide about leading, enabling and inspiring, but it's all about how we're going to empower residents, volunteers and groups. So it's about people, firstly, as well as tackling landscape scale efforts through partnership. So the focus of this is captured in our landscape features, which I'm going to come on to next, our estate, and citizen science, which I've already mentioned. So our nature recovery network. So these are our features, our landscape scale efforts. And these are our long list of features which we want to focus on. The River Test, the River Loddon, which I'm sure Councillor Tuck wouldn't let us leave off. The North Wessex Downs AONB, our northern heathlands, accessible natural green space, our verges and our hedges. So the strategy is going to identify species and groups of species, taxa, that help us target our efforts and monitor the health of the landscape. So this first list is specifically around monitoring. So how can we monitor the success? We want to do this on rivers through river flies, Lepidoptera, which are butterflies and moths, farmland birds, herpetofauna, which are reptiles and amphibians, rare arable flora, bees, bats, fungi as well. Again, this is a long list. It's also going to identify specific species which we want to target. So these are species that are have special value for the borough, or it could be that they are charismatic species that can help garner interest and enthusiasm. It can be that they're keystone species, which by helping conserve those particular species, you help conserve a number of others or particular habitats. So we've got the full suite of helleborines in there. Herb Paris, Petty Whin, which I think we saw on a previous slide. Juniper on our chalk grassland. Willow tit, nightjars, skylarks, swifts, barn owls, white-clawed crayfish, brown trout, stag beetle, otter, water voles, dormice, hedgehogs, harvest mice and hare. Moving on to our habitats that we want to try and specifically target. We want to focus on our woodland, our scrub, rivers, chalk downland, meadows, wetlands, hedges and heathland. We'll allow some time for questions, but is it worth, before we move on to questions, just to highlight the next steps? So we're coming back to you with a draft strategy on the 17th of January. We're going to Cabinet on the 5th of March, and the publication will be the end of March 2024.
Anyone got any questions? Yes, Councillor Golding.
Two brief points. First, on rivers, I'd be very keen to see recognition of the Bourne rivulet in our papers, specifically given its role as one of our very unique chalk streams. I think that's a significant omission that certainly my residents in Hurstbourne Priors and St Mary Bourne would like to see. Second, I think it might be useful to engage with West Berkshire in relation to the River Enbourne Valley, which I think is an area which is broadly neglected by the two councils. I think there's a lack of strategic working on that border. So those are the two specifics that I'd like to see. But obviously, as a broader comment, it is a very high level set of aspirations. And while welcome, it will be important that at some point those are brought forward with specific actions. Because one of the troubles you find in local government is that so many strategies and papers are prepared, but actually what residents want to see are concrete actions. So I think that's something that I think we all need to take away. Yes, let's welcome a strategy coming forwards, but let's start talking about the concrete actions that we're going to take.
Yeah, thank you for that point about the Bourne rivulet. To my mind, that's captured in the river test. It's very much part of the catchment. And yeah, the West Berks, the River Embourne, it's a fair point and something that we haven't actually identified as yet. It's the first time it's been referenced, Councillor, so that's good, appreciate that. We have already started developing specific actions. We haven't brought those here today because we need to get the priorities right first, and the priorities will feed the actions, and we want your input on the priorities specifically. You'll have a chance to review those actions come the first draft.
Just a very quick response, if I may. I would be quite keen for the Bourne rivulet to get specific recognition. I think the river test is, a specific catchment, but there's a risk of missing the important and unique, distinctive qualities of the Bourne rivulet if we don't make this recognition now. It is a specific and different contribution that's globally valuable. So that would be if I had one point I could insist upon, it would be that the Bourne rivulet is one of those bullets in a separate way and is not regarded as just part of the catchment of the test.
Councillor Fillmore.
Yeah, whilst we're talking about our own wards, yes, I'd like to reiterate about the river test. I've spoken to Rob about the implication of the closure of Portals paper mill and what it's done to the catchment area of the river test, and we've certainly got proof of otters on that stretch of the river, so we're quite keen on that that stretch of the river test to be included. Going on a bit farther, you've mentioned development control a few times in that, but some of those policies are out of the control of this borough. It's certainly when you talk about the reduction of the protection from nutrients, which has been reduced, and then what weight can we provide at DC for some of these policies, because I mean we get developers coming along telling us they're going to rewild up a specific area of greenfield. They've already concreted over a massive percentage of it. So I think we need to go outside our own estate and look at the whole countryside, but certainly DC needs a bit of weight and defence of some of these areas.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we've been working very closely with our colleagues in planning, Mike Townsend and Lisa Sowden, and in planning policy, Joe Bromley et al. And we actually feel we've been working closely as well with the two councillors on making sure that the updated local plan is ambitious and puts the emphasis in the right place, we feel like. And we are very mindful that biodiversity net gain provides quite a big opportunity for the local authority to support positive impact across the borough. And we're working on very limited information on that from government still, despite launching in January. And we're hoping to develop an iterative approach to make sure that we come back to yourselves, actually, ideally, in time with a set of ambitions to make sure that we're pushing the envelope there as well. That's a separate point.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be serious about what our protected species are and how we're going to protect them. We can't swallow a thing that a slowworm corridor or a dormouse corridor is going to react properly.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So, Connor?
Thanks. Mine's more of a commentary on the presentation, which is very good. But the thing in my mind, this screams systems to me. I mean, the whole philosophy of systems and how things interact. What would be helpful, I think, for the group and for for wider publication comms, is an example of a negative example of where you take something out of the system and how that impacts on all the various other areas, and a positive. So you have an example of it doesn't have to be the full systems map, of course, because that's way too complicated, but you could do an abstract, I think, that would be very helpful for just really impressing on us just how important, just for instance, off the top of my head, people think of a slow worm or a worm or something like that, or a butterfly, and you think, well, how does that how does that impact on the system? But when you take it out of the system, then you can demonstrate, well, this is what happens. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic point, actually, and yeah, something I'll give some thought to and see how we can include that. Yeah.
Councillor Golding?
Thank you. What's been left out? Because in the nicest possible way, a priority is the most important thing, and this feels like a list of everything, which is is a real gentle criticism. But actually, if we want to achieve anything, then we do need priorities. We do need to make sure we're focusing on the most important things, and that we have kind of sifted and weighted things kind of accordingly.
Councillor Gold, what would you think of the priorities? Because that's obviously the feedback that the officers are looking for from us.
Well, I suppose my feedback is I think they're probably too numerous and too broad. But it was a question first off, because obviously if you have already sifted them and there's lots of things that you've left out, but for really good reasons, then that would be helpful context to have.
No, we haven't sifted them yet. No, this is very much a long list, as I said. Yeah, what we're getting a little bit aggressive there. Sorry with the microphone. No, part of this we welcome things that you think we should drop. This is very much a long list which has been produced through that engagement process. We wanted to bring it to you early in a more raw form, just for you to see where we are, rather than bring you something that is finalised in effect. So yes, it's a very long list, and I think that speaks to several things. One is actually quite how extensive the challenge is. Another is quite how broad even special interest groups are in their focus, and how that is going to be a challenge in making sure that we keep those groups interested and engaged as well. So we've been cautious in how we communicate that, and been making sure that we don't dismiss anyone's priorities at this point anyway. And then moving forward, we want to make sure if we do drop anything, clearly we have a good reason for doing so. So it's all part of the process, and welcome the councillors' feedback on things that we think, it's probably a bit superfluous. Very happy to hear that. Yeah.
Anyone else? Councillor Philip? Yeah, thank you. You're happy with that? I think, this is the very long list, and I think it's a bit like the climate action plan that we just discussed. It's got an awful lot of bits in it that could be added, and again, we've just got to be careful that we don't actually overstretch the budget and everything else, because there are things that need to be done. But again, I think perhaps, as we've done with the climate one, is that we do say other people can deliver some of these things. We don't have to do everything ourselves. And I think it's getting that engagement right with other organisations that are maybe already doing it and maybe better placed to deliver some of it than we are. While we might be interested in, we can't actually do everything ourselves, and I think that's a message I think we all share. So, have you got any other comments you want to add, Councillor Tomlin?
Well, I think that's an important thing to say about the budget, in the sense I think it's the council's duty to start to find the budget, to prioritise the budget, because this is the more I've got into this subject now. I mean, like everybody, I have not everybody, I have a garden, and I, kind of like trees and the, aware of the damage to the environment. But when you drill into this and to see the efforts of the team and the efforts of all of these community groups and their passion, and actually the ideas and the conflicts, that it's a very serious subject, and we haven't, it's not a rehearsal. We can only do it once. So I think it is the duty of the council to get these strategies and not hide from them. Yeah, of course we can't spend all our money all at once, but I think we have to find ways of doing it. So that's where I'd come to on that subject, that we've got to do it all somehow.
Yeah, Councillor, I agree with you, and I think that is we've got the priority, whether we need to deliver it, whether we can provide the money to actually do the work that's needed, or whether we can look for other sources, etc. But I'm sure that when you do your action plan, it will be fully costed, and we'll be able to see what the implications are. And it may be that we can't do everything straight away, but longer term view, which I think all of us are aware that things have to be done in a priority order. So have anybody got any other things that they particularly thought needs to be priority one in what's been suggested, or something that perhaps isn't a priority for you? I think you've blinded them with science. That's all right. Okay. We will send round the updated presentation again, so you will have an opportunity to ask any more questions and make some more offer. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Rob, for your presentation. And I think basically we have noted the progress so far, and we'll add whatever we can to the ongoing discussions. I'm ready for the full presentation in January. Okay, thank you. Let the officers go home. We haven't got much more, you'll be pleased to hear. We have now look at the work programme, which you've got at the back of your papers. I'll find mine. Obviously, we've had these meetings this evening, and you will see that in January we have got some items ahead. In January, Councillor Lee has asked for a presentation on the leisure park, and we wondered if you wanted to have that update, or you would prefer to have something on the sports and leisure presentation that was given to you last week, those of you able to come to the workshop. Whether you would prefer that. We're not going to guarantee anything because Councillor Lee isn't here, but if you feel that that would be more useful, we're happy to consider that. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a really good question. I don't think it necessarily should be an either or. I do think the leisure park is very important with the aquadrome, but I think there were areas of the not the LNRA so much for me, because that is a document, it is a factual document, and it is what it is. It's more how we are responding to it that I think CEP should be thinking about. And I was thinking that perhaps rather than trying to take the whole strategy of sports pitches and facilities, or whatever it's called, in one great big thing, because it's a massive area, that we could perhaps look at a couple of sports. Say cricket might be one of them. Pick another, don't mind what it is. But how are we addressing what the LNRA says about that, how have we addressed it in the past to get where we are now from the last LNRA? So scrutinising what we've done up till now and scrutinising what we plan to do going forward, because I think that's what CEP is about. It's about looking at what's happened and commenting and reflecting on that, not just hearing and noting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vo. Yes, it's exactly what we were thinking here, that in fact it would be useful to have a little bit more of a scrutiny. Would you like to add something, Fiona?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just that I'm really conscious that you're keen not to receive just updates from officers, and that the Aquadrome was down as an update. And whilst we can obviously provide you with an update, we could send a written update, or you could discuss it. But Councillor Lee was really keen to talk about the sports strategies, and Councillor, your suggestion I think is a really positive one. He was keen for them to come to your committee in January as well, and it was in his absence just to engage, to find out, you know, whether you'd be happy to also have the sports strategy item, but also how you would like us to feed back on the Aquadrome in a useful way.
Thank you. I think on the Aquadrome, if it's at a stage where we can't do more than comment on it, then I see no problem with a paper for information coming to that CEP, where it's more about the CEP members understanding where we are with the Aquadrome, because it's a very complex process. And I think it's just, you know, we've had changes in the committee since it last came. So I think it's helpful to get everybody in the same place in preparation for when the business plan does come out for consideration and what those options are in it. Because, you know, my understanding is at the moment there's a business plan being worked out, probably an outline business plan, if I've got the terminology right, where some options are within it. So merely understanding what those options are, so that when we do get sight of that, CEP members will have had time to reflect on it. Not asking them to make comments now because it's not complete, but just so that people are aware of it. So I think that's different from having a discussion and a scrutinising of what has actually been happening with the play pitch sports facility strategy and how we intend to take that forward. You know, I think that there are two different things. One's information, but could still be useful to present literally as a short piece item, as against a proper discussion and delving into the detail of the other. Thank you.
And thank you. And obviously we need to get Councillor Morrow availability as well to come along and talk if we're going to do the wider sports as well. So that's fine. Have you got any comments? Obviously, we've got the biodiversity strategy, which you've heard in January. Now, and then obviously in March, currently, we're going to be looking at the Integrated Care Board and HCC, identify any impacts on opportunities for ourselves. And we've also been asked to put forward the community safety priorities and new policing model, which I believe Councillor Chastain actually has asked for. Obviously, we haven't got descriptions against those yet, but anybody got any thoughts of anything else they'd like to add in for future? Because we did say that we wouldn't just have a programme for this financial year, that we would start looking ahead to see if there were other things that we wanted to add. So anybody's got any other ideas for what we might add in the future, please say so. No? Okay. Well, you've always get the opportunity to fill in the form and put any suggestions forward anyway, so that's fine. Now, as far as I know, we have no confidential items, so we're not going to exclude the public or other press, and so I'll close the meeting. And thank you for your time and effort this evening, and safe journey home.